It is exactly 1 p.m. Eastern, and I'm going to get us started just because we have a lot of really wonderful material to cover in the next 60 minutes. I know people are still filing in, so I'll start off with just some brief introductions and housekeeping that Cameron covered for those who joined a little earlier, but I'll just review really quickly. And hopefully that will give everyone time to join and make sure you've got your sound and everything figured out. My name is Elizabeth Ling, and I am the coordinator of criminal defense initiatives at the Center for Court Innovation. I'm also one of the site coaches for BJA's Second Chance Act Evaluation and Sustainability Technical Assistance Project. I'm very excited to be hosting today's panel along with my colleague Lisa Vavanese from the Center and Amanda Young from RTI. Our goal today is to provide Second Chance Act grantees as well as their partners with an overview of why and how you might use social media to your program's benefit. We are especially lucky to have a staff member from a Second Chance Act grantee with us to share some real life examples and tips based on his day-to-day management of his program's social media presence. But like I said before I introduce our panelists, a few brief pieces of housekeeping. Everyone's video is turned off and you are muted, so no need to worry about that. If you need, you can turn captioning services on or off using the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And if you have any technical or logistical questions, please make sure to put those in the chat box. We'll definitely be monitoring that throughout today's presentation. If you have questions for any of the panelists, please put those in the Q&A box. We do have a good amount of time reserved for questions after panelists speak, but please feel free to add those questions as they come up throughout the presentation. And again, this webinar will be a full 60 minutes, and at the very end, we're gonna have a very brief survey. So if you can, please stay until then and complete the survey. Those are always really helpful for us. And with that, I'm gonna turn to introducing our panelists. So today we have Emma Dayton. She is a senior digital strategist at the Center for Court Innovation. In addition to managing the center's primary social media accounts, Emma also advises on over 30 additional accounts for each of the center's different operating projects or programs. And if you're interested in checking out Emma's handiwork, I've actually just dropped the center's different social media handles in our chat box, so please feel free to check those out. And then next we have Nathaniel Aranda, who's the Director of Development at Family Pathfinders of Tarrant County, which is a Second Chance Act grantee that is also participating in the Evaluation and Sustainability Program. In his role, Nathaniel manages the organization's fundraising and marketing efforts, which include the day-to-day tasks of the organization's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. Thank you, Emma and Nathaniel, so much for joining us today and sharing with us your expertise. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn things over to Emma. She's going to give us an overview of what social media is, why you might want to consider using it for your program, and provide some general suggestions to maximize the benefits.
Thanks, Liz. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you all for joining and for giving us this bit of your time of your day. So I do run the Center for Court Innovation social media accounts. And as Liz said, I advise on the center's 25 to 30 operating projects that operate throughout New York City, some of which are reentry programs, some of which touch on all sorts of criminal justice reform topics and areas, alternatives to incarceration, mental health services, and additional social services. So while I may not be a reentry expert, I definitely will look to you all on that, as well as Nathaniel, who you'll hear from. I'm hoping that I can provide just a high-level overview of sort of the basics and best practices in social media. So you can go to the next slide. I just want to start by getting us all on the same page of what is social media as I talk through it. Basically, for the sake of today's presentation, myself and Nathaniel are going to be focusing on the big three: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Those are probably the ones that you all are the most familiar with. Maybe you even use those channels in your personal life, as well as your professional life here as to why you're attending this presentation. But also don't forget that social media also includes LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest. It includes the newer, scarier, she whispers, platforms like Snapchat, TikTok, those like video-based apps that that the younger generation are really moving towards. But it also includes Tumblr, it includes Reddit, it also includes one-on-one messaging apps like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and some of even those AI bot-based chat apps that we can all access. I just want to like set a base that as we're talking about social media, it can mean all of those things. So it is a big world, but we are mostly talking about those big three today. And then when I'm talking about accounts, I'm talking about your program's accounts. So for me, like the Center for Court Innovations Facebook account, Twitter account, Instagram account, but also don't forget that you can tap into your partners, your organizational partners' social media accounts. You can ask them for support. You can engage with them. All of those things are a big piece of the social media puzzle. And you can also consider your supporters' social media and your own. These are all social media accounts to take into your plan and into your strategy as you move forward. Next slide, please. So social media is important and can be utilized in a lot of different ways. It can expand your reach and spread the word about the work that you do in your program. It's certainly a way to share information and to participants, to clients, to supporters, to just your general community, but also to tell your story, your unique approach to the work or your unique benefit to your neighborhood or to your community. It is at its core a way to connect with your network of supporters or your audience, and can be utilized to grow that network. And that doesn't just mean donors, that can mean advocates or ambassadors or depending on, I mean, reentry is probably a very specific set of users, but in other ways, just the general community that you're reaching. And it's also a way to be a thought leader, maybe in criminal justice reform broadly, maybe in reentry, maybe in mental health services, whatever that may be. But what social media is not, Amanda, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. We think of social media as a free tool. The actual platforms are open and available for anyone to sign up for, but it's not free. To be strategic and to be thoughtful and to have a well-planned social media strategy, it takes staff time, it takes forethought, and it takes, it really does. You have to carve out the time to dedicate to it. And other things that it's not a one-way broadcasting tool. It maybe has been in the past, but the way that the algorithms are changing, the way that people themselves think of your own social media use and the way that you engage with the platforms, it's not a one-way broadcasting tool. It's really meant to be engaging, to be communicative, and to connect people with other people. Think about the way that the algorithms prioritize content that is highly shared or highly commented. It is meant to connect those individuals to other individuals, not necessarily to businesses or brands. Social media is also not a catch-all. So maybe everything that you do doesn't end up going on social media. There is room to be thoughtful and really intentional about what content you post on social media. And unfortunately, it can't be an afterthought. So I would say that if you do pursue a social media strategy, do so with intention and do so by setting goals and setting that strategy in advance and getting maybe more than just yourself, getting a team on board in order to support. All right, moving ahead. I wanted to talk through a little bit about if social media is right for you. Maybe social media is actually not where you would be, you could best see the results that you're looking for. But I just wanted to talk through a few ways that you can sort of vet or consider which platform might be the best for you. On the next slide, I have a comparison of the different social media. Oh, I'm sorry. Skipped ahead a slide, I think. So the first thing that I would want you to do is to consider your audience. Who do you want to reach? And are you currently reaching them? Do you already have a website, an email program, or do you already have social media accounts in place where you are reaching them? If you're not reaching them, consider how you could. And think through what their age is, what their interests are, their profession, their location. And then we'll talk through kind of how those demographic information can line up with one of the 3 different platforms in order to inform which social media or which platform you may choose. And then I would also suggest that if you are considering social media, but maybe you're not exactly sure about who your audience is or how you should engage with them, research similar organizations. Maybe there are other reentry programs. Maybe you can look to Nathaniel's organization, see who follows them and what they post. How do they engage with their audience? Are they successful? What works, what doesn't? Spend some time just kind of poking around, seeing what exists, what inspires you, what resonates with you for your program's goals. And then, once you've defined your audience and you have those basic demographic information down, are they a young person? Are they a policymaker? Are they a funder? How do they communicate? Are they more informal? Are they more formal? Do they use emojis? Things, just even basic questions like that. And you can incorporate that into which platform you choose and how you communicate on those platforms. So I think on the next slide, I have a breakdown of the different, how to choose a platform. You can jump ahead even another slide. So I believe you'll get these slides after, so you can refer back to these in more detail. But Facebook is definitely the biggest platform. There's research that says between 70 and 80% of US adults have a Facebook account, but it does tend to be ages 35 and up who are the most engaged on that platform. And the purpose of it is really to connect with friends and family. So we know that the Facebook algorithm deprioritizes business or brand content. And so really only 2 to 5% of your audience will even see your content. And we know that the algorithm loves video. So Facebook has leaned into their video algorithm because it's a very engaging content form and it gets people to stay on the platform for even longer, which in Facebook's instance, they want you to stay on the platform so that you consume more ads, and that is how they make money. But the positive thing about Facebook is that there are very robust targeting tools for advertising or for boosting a post. So if you have a post that's doing well organically, maybe it's really resonating with your audience and you're getting more likes, more comments than usual, you can put some money behind that post to boost it to reach even more of your own audience or like-minded people whom you can target through very specific demographic targeting. And I could talk for another hour on that, so I'm going to keep moving ahead. For Twitter, Twitter is good for new ideas, hot takes, bite-sized information, and it's a very quick platform. The average lifespan of a tweet is 20 minutes. So basically that means you could tweet every 20 minutes, every day of your life, and the platform would not punish you for posting too much content, whereas that can be the case on other platforms. And Twitter, as we know, is great for hashtags. So things like hashtag holidays do really well. These are things like the example that I like to use, National Donut Day. That may not be relevant to you or the topic that you're working in, but it's a good sort of general example to look to. National Donut Day might be trending on on Twitter or on these platforms. Instagram is a much younger audience, about 18 to 34 ages are engaged, and we know that they're ready to engage. So I'm looking at the time, I'm running behind, so I'm going to keep flying through my slides. Amanda, you can go ahead to the next one. So it's just some general best practices. These apply to all platforms. Post regularly. So long breaks or inconsistent posting can hurt your reach. So do set a realistic goal and stick to it, whether that's once a day or once a week. I wouldn't recommend spacing out your posts more than once a week, but do set a realistic schedule and then do try to stick to it. And the other piece of social media is that you need to be there to engage with your followers, partner organizations, supporters, reshare their content, comment on it, like it, just be visible in your community. That helps your accounts grow. It helps you be a good nonprofit partner. It's just beneficial for all aspects of being on social media. All right. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to share one example of a post that the Center for Court Innovation did on a report that had come out. So we had a research report released, and on the left, you can see that we set the header image in an Instagram post that's square with the red background and had a longer caption. And then on the right, you can see that we translated that same image to an article view on Twitter and had a much shorter caption with a link, direct click to link to more. So I just wanted to share how you can use your content across platforms, and or if you only, one thing that I wanted to say when you're choosing a platform is also be realistic about the time that you have that you can set aside to your platform. So maybe it's about choosing one platform to start or choosing your top two. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, if you're just starting out on social media, to try to go big on all of the three platforms that we've talked about. So I wanted to share this example to show how you can reutilize content, but you have to customize it to each channel that you're working on. But also, this could be two different posts about the same topic on one channel. So just to say that just because you've posted about something once doesn't mean that you can't post it again, specifically on Twitter, but also on Instagram. I just wouldn't recommend using the exact same visual more than once. The human brain is really good at recognizing images and visuals. So consistency is important. So you can use the same image in different ways, but I wouldn't necessarily repeat the same image multiple times, if that is a clear distinction. Okay, next slide. So this is, I could again talk for an hour about how to plan out social media content, but I do really recommend that you set a plan and that you are proactive in planning. I know that your programs do a ton of stuff. You have ongoing programs, maybe you have community events, you want to promote awareness of your program. You maybe want to be a thought leader. You have, lots going on. You can do all of those. You can post about all of those things on social media, but it will help your sanity and your, and the success of your social media if you are being proactive in planning it. So look ahead. What months do you have events? What months does your organization have fundraising scheduled? What days or holidays do you observe? That's back to the hashtag holiday that I spoke to before. I have a spreadsheet that tracks all of them that are relevant to my organization. And so I would recommend creating those kind of internal resources that you can look to for easy look ahead and easy planning. All right, next slide. I think I put together a couple of really brief examples. Oh, yeah, I would say one, and then once you plan, just, schedule it in advance. You can use tools like Hootsuite, TweetDeck, Twitter itself actually just rolled out a scheduling functionality. Facebook has great publishing tools where you can schedule posts in advance. So if you can carve out time, at the beginning of every week and plan and schedule those 2 or 3 posts for the week or whatever it is that your scheduling frequency is. And then, on a day-to-day basis, it's just about checking in, monitoring. It doesn't have to be that like last minute scramble to get something posted, which we've all been there. I know that it happens. All right, next slide. So I put together, this is kind of small, but you can see it in more detail when you get the slides after. These are just a couple of free tools that you can utilize for your own planning. So in the left-hand side on the top, you see the annual appeal 2020. That's like a visual representation of a month where I was able to slot in specific posts and through color coding to say like, this is on Facebook, this is on Twitter, this will be an email. Maybe your brain doesn't work that way, so you prefer more of a checklist, which you can see on the right with the black and white and red squares. That is actually a screenshot of where myself and my colleague, our graphic designer, plan out our Instagram grid. So the checklist are the dates and the post topics. On the right is our actual Instagram grid. This one isn't fully filled in, it's just sort of placeholder text. But that is an actual screenshot of how we plan our Instagram. And then on the bottom, I mocked up a Trello board. So maybe you don't like Google Docs or Excel spreadsheets. Maybe you prefer a project management tool. You can create that kind of system within Trello. So these will be available for you all to take a look at. All right, next slide. Mobilizing partners. So this is like proactively reaching out to on-the-ground partners, people that are in your community, and asking them to share your content, asking them to share an upcoming event or news. You can make it as easy as possible for them, create a toolkit with sample language, with graphics that you've created, put that in a Google Drive folder, send it along. Don't be afraid to ask. I would just, consider that you return the favor. Maybe the next week they'll also have an event that's coming up that would be relevant for your audience, and you can do the same. You can offer to share that on your accounts, and you can be a good partner. You can access a new audience, and so can your nonprofit counterparts. Next slide. All right, so after you've done all of this amazing planning and brainstorming and strategizing, you want to make sure that all of this hard work has paid off. So it is really important to measure the effectiveness of your social media efforts. And so I do have an example, just like how I have tracked it in the past on a spreadsheet. But basically you want to track either weekly or monthly numbers. You can decide what's important to your team. Some statistics that you might want to look at are followers, engagement rate, impressions, maybe website visits from those particular platforms. If you have Google Analytics enabled, you can see how much traffic comes from Twitter, how much traffic comes from Facebook. And you can track those things, as I said, weekly or monthly. And it really helps if you're looking back on a 3-month, 6-month, quarterly basis to have everything in one place, and those metrics that you've already decided are important to you, so that you can track the progress over time. Also, it's super helpful to track top performing content. So what tweet did the best, what Instagram post did the best, and that can be however you choose to measure effectiveness. So if that means it got the most comments, or if it means it got the most impressions, just decide what top performing means to you, and then track that week over week or month over month. I promise you it will pay off, and it will be worth it in the end. And on the next slide, I just have an example of a spreadsheet that I've used to track numbers on a monthly basis. So just super simple. And like I said, it helps when you look back on it as an aggregate. All right, next slide. I think I'm just about done. Yes. Okay, perfect. That was my last slide. So next I'm going to turn it over to Nathaniel so that you can hear from Pathfinder specifically about how they've used social media to strengthen their reentry programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma, for this great information. Next slide, please. Okay, so is social media the right choice for your second chance program? So for us at Pathfinders, it was an easy decision to say yes. We're going to jump into the social media world. This was maybe about 8 or so years ago. And at that time, we were a small staff, so we're still a smaller nonprofit. At that time, we had about 10 staff. We had a part-time fund development person, but then also our staff team members who are millennial staff, they really wanted to have some ownership of it too. So they jumped on board and said, hey, you know what, it's important for us to share the great work we're doing. So I'm just gonna jump in and help out with it. So over the years, our team grew, and now we have, like I said, 17 staff. And myself as the director of development, I'm the one who works with the fundraising and the marketing activities. So, and one thing for me is how do we balance development and marketing duties? So for me, they kind of go hand in hand. I think a fund development and marketing is kind of the same thing. It's really an extension of one another, and it really helps me share what we're doing with our community, our volunteers, our donors, future clients, past clients, really the success of what's going on in our program. So again, years ago, it was a team effort, and today I kind of handle it myself, but with some great input from our staff and our leadership team. So from a leadership perspective, it's important to look at the agency resources that we have available and what we can allocate towards social media. So a great way to allocate some funds that's not too expensive, kind of like Emma had mentioned, was looking at sponsored and boosted posts. So one thing that we did recently, we had a post for our Lending Circles program, which is a zero fee, zero interest social loan program that was doing really well on Facebook. We had a lot of people getting engaged, liking the post, sharing the post. So we said, hey, you know, let's throw some money behind this. We had a $20 campaign that lasted over a week. And at the end of it, our goals were to make sure that we could, one, spread awareness for the program, and then two, get people to sign up for our program. So at the end, it was a success. We had, I think, probably close to 30 shares for that post, and we had thousands of impressions, and we actually had some people who were interested in financial coaching and learning about the program sign up for the program. So it was a really great success. So an easy way to get people to share or to get a bigger organic reach is to have your staff share. So in our weekly staff meetings, I try to remind everyone, said, hey, these are our posts for the weeks. Please look on maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and go ahead and share the post. And we do that with our volunteers and our board of directors as well, because we know the further it is shared, it's like organically, when we go to boost and sponsor a post, it just amplifies the reach, it amplifies the message we're trying to get out into the community. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at the role of agency leadership, whether that's the executive director, the chief officer, or the leadership team, it's important to kind of establish some guidelines. So looking at creating an agency policy around social media. So if you have one, make sure that all the staff is on board with it. Make sure that they understand kind of the do's and don'ts of posting on social media. If we don't have one, what can we do collaboratively as a leadership team, as a board, to create a policy that is reflective of our agency and the importance of our mission? So one thing I like to tell our staff and all of our meetings, and really whenever I can, is regardless of your position, our staff, you guys are an ambassador to the organization. You guys are champions of the work we're doing. So be mindful of what you're posting on social media, because again, it reflects the agency. Once it goes out there, it can become viral. Once it's out there again, you can't really take it back. So we want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward, in that our staff is being a good representation of our agency as a whole. So another thing for our agency leadership is we got together and we looked, okay, these are what we want to share. This is what we want to accomplish this year. So we wanted to grow our veterans program a little bit. So we said, okay, we're going to add some more veterans posts in our social media plan. We want to highlight the great work that our Second Chance program is doing. So let's go ahead and add some more posts to that throughout the whole year. We want to highlight our volunteers. So let's carve out some time for that. So it's really looking at what you want to accomplish as an organization and kind of flowing it out on an annual basis. So if you create a high level annual plan, it's easy to flow into months and even weeks. And so one thing that I learned working at a smaller nonprofit is you don't have to spend a lot of money or time on social media to share your program's impact. You just have to be intentional. So by creating that annual plan, you're setting that commitment. You're saying, yes, we as an agency are committing to sharing the impact of our agency, our program, our constituents to the community, and this is how we're going to accomplish it. So I know some organizations, we have a a full marketing team. Some have maybe a part-time person, or some were even like in Pathfinder's situation where we had a couple people who were committed. They wanted to share the importance of social media and what we're doing in the digital world. So whatever really works for you, just kind of think of it as a leadership team, as a program team, and say, okay, this is what we want to do it, and this is how we're going to accomplish it. And really be thoughtful of how you're posting and what you're posting and how you're integrating your Second Chance program into your larger social media strategy. So at Pathfinders, we have several programs. So we really want to strike a balance between our reentry program, our single mothers program, our financial coaching program. We really make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be highlighted and to be championed on our social media platform. Next slide, please. So we like to always say that we're pretty social on social media. We kind of like Emma said, we stick to the big three right now. We are looking at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our primary audience is on Facebook, followed by Instagram and Twitter. And one of our missions this year is to enhance our LinkedIn presence. So we know there's a lot of working professionals on there. We know there's a lot of businesses we love to connect with, and everyone loves a feel-good story. So that's something we're working on right now, to integrate how we can share what we're doing on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and translate that to a LinkedIn audience as well. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Pathfinders TC. And on Instagram, on LinkedIn, we're at Family Pathfinders. Next slide, please. So looking at from a high level, looking to more of a localized day-to-day level, again, we created that annual social media plan, and that's really what drove us to decide, okay, it's important for us to reach our constituents, reach the community, our volunteers, our donors, at least 2 to 3 times a week. So we made that commitment early on and said, okay, we're going to post relevant information, crafted information, thoughtful information 2 to 3 times a week. And again, our Second Chance posts are part of our larger social media strategy. So something else that we like to do is we like to get engaged and involved in local and national events. One thing that we love to do is a Motivation Monday. We've been doing that for about a year, and we've just gotten such a great response and feedback from our donors and volunteers. They said, hey, I love looking on Monday morning at Pathfinder's Facebook page because I love that you are starting my week off with some inspiration. And that's really helped us grow our platform and our reach, because people just kind of love that pep on Monday morning. And some other things we try to tap into are like our America Saves Week, which was just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, where we are teaching people about financial coaching. We collaborated with organizations across the country to share, okay, this is the importance of savings. This is why you need an emergency savings account. All of our staff, we shared, I'm saving for, some said retirement, a vacation. And it was a really great way to be collaborative, not just locally, but on a national level as well. And we did the same thing with, like, let's say Black History Month, National Mentor Month, National Reentry Week, Volunteer Week, and just whatever is really relevant to your organization to make sure that you can kind of tap into that platforms and those weeks that everyone is already involved in. And Something else that's important for us too is whenever we see a nonprofit who, let's say they just got an award from a local organization or they just got recognized for some great outcomes, we love to go on their Facebook page, Instagram, or Twitter and just say, hey, congratulations. We're so proud to be a part of this community with you. You guys are doing great work for the community. So that shows that we're engaging as a community, we're collaborating with other nonprofits, and we do the same thing when people are posting on our wall, whenever they're liking one of our photos and say, hey, that's relevant to me, or you guys are doing such great work. We interact back with them. So they're wanting to communicate with us. So it's important to make sure that you're reaching back out to them and not letting too much time lag. Next slide, please. So something that's really important for us, and I think nonprofits in general, is to make sure that you're staying on brand. So we all have a logo, a mission that we're very proud of. And one thing that I hate to see is when people change the color of their logos, they stretch them, they shrink them, they're distorted, because it doesn't reflect well of the great work you guys are doing in the community already. So one thing with our social media, I like to stick to a similar color palette. So we have two primary colors, a light blue and a dark blue. In most of my social media, I use our light blue. I'll use a white or a gray. Very rarely I'll use a dark blue. But so that way when people see our posts, they see, oh, that's Pathfinders. They see the P logo. They see, mentoring changes lives. They see financial coaching, and they said, oh, this is Pathfinders. This is the great work they're doing. And I know not a lot of people have, InDesign, Illustrator, Adobe, these high software programs. So there's other places that you can go to that are free, that are really easy to use. And one that I love to use is Canva, because it's free. They have a lot of samples. They have a lot of templates, a lot of similar graphics that you can use. And you can, again, streamline it, making sure that you're staying on brand. It's a consistent message. And think of using similar fonts and colors. So that way it's, again, very, very intentional what you're doing and how you're posting it. So something that's really important to us is that we are sharing and highlighting stories as a representation through photos of the people that we serve. So if our organization, the majority of people in our Second Chance program are Hispanic, we want to make sure that the majority of the photos that we use are Hispanic as well. We want to make sure that if our demographics of the people we serve are maybe 20s, 30s, and 40s, they are of a younger generation, a younger demographic on our photos as well, not people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So just really looking sure to make that your photos are representative of who they are. I know some people their clients like to be featured in photos. If that's the case, just make sure that you have a photo media release form. And even though we have that on our clients, we still like to respect their privacy and their dignity. So the majority of the time, we still like to stick to stock photos as well. And something that's very easy to be forgotten because we're very busy. We all have programs we're working on. We're doing a lot of other great things in the community, is making sure that we check for spelling and grammar. So if you have someone who's great at that, just say, hey, can you look at my post for the week? I'd love for your input. Make sure that, I don't have a typo on this great post that I created with this beautiful graphic. And then people just remember that, oh, they forgot the word the, or they had a typo or a spelling error in there. So that's pretty important for us at Pathfinders as well. So another great thing for to share that great things you're doing in your program is storytelling. And one thing that I did when I first came on board is we used to call them client success stories, but I know the word success can be kind of scary to some people. So, and our staff especially, because there's like, well, they've only been in the program a little bit of time. They don't consider what they did a huge success. So I shifted the word to using impact, because everyone has a starting point. Everyone is on a journey to somewhere. Everyone has dreams and aspirations and goals. So where are they on that journey? So how can we highlight the great things that they've done, the great things that they're going to do in a story? And once we made that shift as an organization, our stories became so much more full of life. Our staff were really excited to share the impact stories. They love to say, hey, this person in this program, they did this. I was like, okay, great, go write it up. Let's go share it on social media next month. So it's almost become kind of like a competition. It's like who can give the most stories, who has the longest stories. So it's really great. And really that leads into don't just use your content once. You can recycle it. I love to recycle. So when our staff turn in their stories, sometimes they're about a page long. So if they're a page long, I might use it in our agency blog. I might use of that page, maybe a few paragraphs in our digital newsletter or annual report. And for social media, I might use 2 or 3 sentences or even a quote or two. So there's really a lot of ways you can reuse the materials so that way people are seeing it multiple times. You're getting the best return on your investment for this time your staff is doing. Next slide, please. And because I am a fundraiser, I love to integrate social media with our annual fundraising plan. So 3 ways that I've seen it pretty successful is when we're creating fundraising appeals, recruiting volunteers, and stewarding donors. So the first graphic you can see with the heart, it was our year-end campaign. We called it 12 Gifts in 12 Months. We were launching our monthly giving program, and we said, okay, hey, how can we use all these stories we've collected over the year and get people to be involved, be interested, and become invested in the agency. So each month was dedicated to a different individual from a different program, a different walk of life, a different story. And what we did there, so every post for different day was, day 1 was this person's story, day 2 was a story. In our newsletters, we shared it a little longer, but it was a great way for our constituents, our people who are in our world, and just general people on social media to see this is the impact that your $5, $10, $20 a month can really make in the lives of these people on their path to self-sufficiency. And then if you look at the other blue one in the bottom right corner, this was our campaign for our North Texas Giving Day, which is a really great collaboration of nonprofits, individuals, supporters across North Texas area once a year in September, where we're all raising critical funds to support our the people we serve. And one thing that we did here was we picked different dollar handles, and again, representing the programs that we serve, and say this $25 a month can help provide a budget box for someone who is just learning the basics of financing. This $100 a month can help a veteran who's needing some employment services. And it was a really great way to share our needs in the community in a digital world. And recruiting volunteers has been effective on social media as well. We know COVID, we can't go out into community events like we used to. We can't go to all these networking activities and events. So we shifted to a digital volunteer recruitment, and it's been pretty successful as well. So I think that's a great way to recruit volunteers, but making sure that they have a place that they can go to, whether it's a website or someone's email address or phone number, making sure, again, the intentionality behind it. And again, I think another great way to use social media with a fund development plan is through recruiting, stewarding our donors, thanking them. So back at the end of February, we had just a horrific winter storm in Texas where a lot of our families and people in the community had no water, electricity for a week, myself included. And because of that, they lost wages, they had pipes burst, their food spoiled. So we put out a call to action and said, hey, will you help a neighbor in need? Will you help us support these individuals so that way they don't go over the edge and become homeless? And we had a tremendous response. So again, we wanted to say thank you for the great work you're doing. We truly appreciate you. You guys are important. We care about you. So those are some really great ways to integrate social media in your annual fundraising plan as well. So that's all I got.
Great. Thank you, Emma and Nathaniel, so much. You both gave really informative presentations. So now we'd like to give our audience members a chance to ask you two some questions. Just a reminder to our audience members, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A box. We'll definitely ask them as they come in. But to get us started, I think one question that either of you can feel free to answer is, What level of experience with social media did you or your program staff have before you started building your social media presence?
I would be happy to start. So I personally have about 10 years of experience in social media, digital marketing, etc. But as was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I also advise our various programs throughout New York on their social media presence, and they have little to no outside of their own personal use. And some of them don't even use social media for their own personal in their personal lives. So there's a wide range of experience when it comes to social media. But I do think that there are so many articles and documentation, and these channels are available to anyone to log into. So I don't think that should be a barrier to you before if you are looking to start social media. Like Nathaniel, I think very clearly laid out, it's just about kind of organizing the content that you have and translating it to specific social media platforms. So it's not necessary to have years and years of communications experience in order to be successful on social media.
So I agree definitely with what Emma just said. I actually come from a content marketing background as well. And for me, what was interesting at that time when I first took that role, I knew nothing about Twitter. So I was looking at blogs, I was looking at websites, and I was like, okay, how is a nonprofit effective on Twitter? And through that research and that work, I became very well versed in it and learned how to do it. And for me, it wasn't embarrassing to look at resources, look at other nonprofits and say, hey, what are you doing? How is this working? I think it just makes us grow as an individual, and it helps us collaborate with other organizations as well. So kind of like before I was on board at Pathfinders, their knowledge of social media was very limited, but they knew they had a passion for the work that we did, and they wanted to get it out there. So they said, hey, okay, we're going to commit to sharing these impact stories. We're going to commit to saying, okay, we need help for this client Christmas party, and we're just going to band together and do it. And it was very successful. So now that we have more of a thought out social media strategy, it's only amplified our voice and our mission and our reach even further. So again, you don't have to have a degree in content marketing. You don't have to know all these bells and whistles of all these programs. You just have to want to learn and take the time to do the research and really find what works best for you. Again, look at, is Facebook the best for me right now? Maybe next year I can look at Twitter. The year after that, we can do Instagram. It's do what you do and do it well, and then expand to further your reach.
Great, thank you. This question, maybe we can start with Nathaniel, because you mentioned the impact stories, and then Emma, please feel free to offer anything that you might want to add. But how do you balance the privacy and confidentiality of program participants when using storytelling on social media?
Sure. Yeah, so one thing that we always do upon intake is we get a client release, and in that client release, it says, we reserve the right to use their photo, their story. But one thing that I do is I always change their name. I never keep the client's name the same, because again, I want to respect their journey. I want to respect their privacy and their dignity. And because they're doing such great work, I would hate for them to see something on Facebook and say, hey, I didn't want that out there, so I'm just going to leave the Pathfinders program. So respecting their dignity is always important for us. But again, looking at changing their names, sometimes changing a couple of their aspects of it, but keeping that core story the same, so that way we know that we're being ethical on our end, that we're telling a true story, but also being able to respect their privacy as well.
We do the same. At the Center for Court Innovation, we have both court-based programs, where the services of the program can often be court mandated. And so that's a very different consideration of the privacy and dignity issues that Nathaniel raised versus some of our community-based programs, which are much more open and available to anyone in that particular community. And so we do a mix of both, depending on the client story We may change the name, we may not include a photo, but use a quote or their general story, but keep it anonymous. Versus with community members, we do have a little bit more freedom in telling their story more openly, though again, we always try to give those, or we do always give those folks agency over their story and how it's told. So we work with, I don't personally interact with a lot of the program participants, but I work with our program staff very closely to get how the language and how we're presenting the story back to the person involved in the story, so that they feel that they have approval and, as I said, agency over how their story is being put out in the world. And yes, we also maintain photo releases for any person, staff, client, community member, anyone whose face we have in a photo. We ensure that we have a photo release signed and on file for that photo.
Great. So related to that, Emma, could you talk a little bit about how or what considerations programs might want to think about if they are trying to use stock images or looking for images that are not of program participants or staff members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so COVID has been a really tough year for getting photos. As I'm sure you all know, there hasn't been in-person events happening, in-person gatherings. So it's been a lot of Zoom screenshots, or it's been a lot of people with face masks on, but they don't make the most dynamic photos, especially if you think about marketing best practices, eye contact, full face, that's like best practice in digital marketing to encourage that connection, that human connection. So COVID's been difficult for getting photos. So one thing that we're doing we're moving into our 25th anniversary year here at the center. We are leaning into illustrations. And so we're having a graphic designer create some illustrations. If that's within your budget, or if you are able to get that pro bono or through an art student or something, that could be a possibility for your program. There are plenty of stock photo websites that are available. So ones that I go to are unsplash.com is great for like freely available photos where you don't have to, they are all free, and some have optional credits that you need to put along with the photo, but a lot of them are just freely available for your non-commercial use. And you can also, this is a trick that not a lot of people know, but even if you do a Google image search, you can set the search results to be Creative Commons license photos, which means that they, again, are freely available for non-commercial use. And so our nonprofit programs would fit under that non-commercial license. So those are a couple of ways that you can find really great stock photos or freely available photos that may, I think, as Nathaniel said, reflect the people that you serve. That is definitely an important component of the photos that you choose.
Great, thank you. And a question from our audience. Do you have any suggestions for a social media approach for grantees that are either local government or local law enforcement agencies and not nonprofits? I suppose another way to think about it is there any different advice that you might give to these agencies?
I mean, I think it, again, depends on what your goals are and who your audience is. I would think that a law enforcement agency might, I'm just hypothesizing here, but a goal might be to build trust within your community. So what can you share? What stories can you share? I think, again, like the way that Nathaniel framed it, what impact stories can you share? What community member stories can you share? How can you encourage that interaction and connection to build that relationship and build that community?
I think also the creating of this social media plan is still relevant, regardless of whether you're for a for-profit organization, nonprofit, local government. It's the intention behind it, saying that we are going to do this. This is how we're going to do it, how often, and on what platforms. And again, kind of like what Emma said, looking at who your constituents are, who do you want to target, then you can kind of flush it out a little further there.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. Both of you mentioned connecting with partners or other community members who are have a shared mission. How do you identify or find those partners and community members?
Well, I think here in Tarrant County, Fort Worth, we're pretty collaborative community. I know at Pathfinders, we partner with more than 40 organizations. So for us, it's easy just to pick up the phone and say, hey, we offer reentry services. Is this something that might be of interest to your constituents? Or we offer financial coaching. Would your single mothers program benefit from it? So we're very collaborative community. We love to go to each other's events, support each other in any way we can. And again, we want to transfer that to the digital world as well. So again, like I said, if we saw someone, one of our partners in the city said, hey, they got an award for, best working place for parents. So we want to say, hey, congratulations. We're so proud of you. You guys are doing a great job. Or if somebody just got a new grant from a big foundation, said, hey, your work is truly going to continue to impact the vulnerable in our community, way to go. So it's really just about those building relationships and, just building partnerships. So it's just, again, it's the intentionality behind it too.
Totally. I completely agree with everything Nathaniel said. Some of the places that I guess I look to for these partnerships or how we identify them often comes through funding, grant partnerships, or even just like there's a couple of nonprofits who partner together to offer a specific service in the city. And so, we consider those 3 nonprofits our partner. And so it's just about like getting in it. The thing is that communications can't happen in a silo. So you really need to be connected throughout your organization. What's happening on the program end, what's happening on the development end, what's happening at the executive leadership level, who are they talking to? Who are their, who are they partnering with? Who's your executive director having conversations with to, start a new program or start a new marketing campaign or whatever it may be. It really is about kind of having a holistic view of the direction that your organization is moving in. And it's about, asking those questions if you don't have that exact information. And the other way that you can find, organizations that you may want to partner with, maybe you don't have an institutional connection, but you see that those folks might be a good match for you. Maybe you find them on social media. Maybe you are looking at a specific hashtag, or you are, finding an article or you're sharing an article that's relevant to your work, and an organization spots your eye or catches your eye. You can engage with that. I've seen this happen in previous roles where you engage with that content with that organization on social media from a communications perspective, and then it can turn into a programmatic partnership, depending on your team and depending on the structure and depending on the organizational priorities. So again, I think it's about communicating with your other teammates and being thoughtful and intentional about who you're engaging with.
Great. Thank you both so much. I'm going to turn things over to Amanda Young from RTI to wrap things up for us today.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate our presenters, Nathaniel and Emma, taking the time to present to us today, and Liz as well for navigating us through the webinar. Before we move into our final poll questions, I did want to remind you all that your ESTA site coaches are available to assist with more individualized work on the topic presented today. So if you have questions or thoughts of how to apply the content to your work, please feel free to reach out to your site coaches. So we are now going to move into our final poll questions. If you'll pull those up for us, please, Cameron. All right, if everyone could take just a moment to answer these poll questions, we would really appreciate your feedback. This feedback is used to report on our performance as part of our BJA funding. And as you're answering these poll questions, I have 2 additional questions that I would like for you to consider, and feel free to type your feedback or responses in the chat pod, or if you prefer to stay anonymous, you can type them in the Q&A pod as well. So the first question is, how could this webinar be improved? If you have any ideas or recommendations for improving the webinar, please feel free to share those suggestions with us. My second question is, are there any topics you would like to see covered in future webinars? If you have any recommendations that you would like to see of topics covered, please feel free to share those in the chat pod. We appreciate everyone's time today, and again, thank you to all of our presenters.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun to get to take a little bit of my day to talk about social media.
Yes, grateful for the opportunity to share kind of what we do at a local organization level.
And I went ahead and followed Pathfinders on our social media, so I encourage anyone else who's hanging on to go do the same.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Great job, everybody.